I'm going to warn you right now. This video is not for you if you are interested in keeping your books in pristine condition. I love annotating in my books while I read. I do it for a number of different reasons, which I'll share in this video, but I also like to pair it with my favorite stationery items. And one of those particular things within my stationery toolkit is the use of a Commonplace notebook. Whenever I'm reading a book, I'm annotating it. I have certain pens and highlighters at my disposal that are my frequent go-to, which I'll be sharing about. And I also take the time to transcribe some of the annotations, some of the things that I'm circling, and putting them inside my Commonplace notebook. So what do I mean when I say annotating your books? Well, at the simplest level, it just means writing in your books. Now, I'm going to preface this. There are a ton of amazing YouTubers out there who talk about writing in their books and talk about the benefits. And I just wanted to take a few minutes to share why I do this and why I find it so beneficial. Number one, I love to read books. And I think one of the great things about annotating your books is that it personalizes your book. It makes it something that's unique to you. Obviously, if I wanted to keep a book pristine, this would be the wrong way of going about it, because the minute I put pen to paper inside one of these guys, well, it changes it. And it is no longer pristine, depending, I suppose, on what your subjective definition of pristine might be. I like to flip through some of the old books that I've read and see my thought process, see my notes, my handwriting in the margins, in the spaces after the words on the page. I find it just adds a certain aesthetic and personalizes that book to me. Somehow it seems like I've consumed that book in all the best ways. Another reason for annotating the books, well, time is limited. I like to read books, and I like the concepts and themes, both in nonfiction and in fiction books, that stick out. And I suppose when I'm building a library of books within my home, or a library of books that I like to refer to, I want to be able to pick up each of these books and quickly flip to the idea or thoughts, quotes, and passages that were meaningful. I want to spend as little time revisiting books as much as possible, if I can help it, unless it's a good, juicy book that I want to dive into again. Part of also using it as a reference guide is to flip to the specific things that I'm looking for, particularly in the nonfiction book. If I haven't touched it in a few months or it's been a period of time, I can go back to the book and flip through it and reconsume it in a faster mechanism, because I have gone through the effort of highlighting the important things that are relevant to me. I can quickly skim through a previous book, revisit it, and retake the content in. Find also that just by the act of annotating the book, of scribbling in the margins, I am able to remember the references and the content that much more. Yes, I combine it with my Commonplace notebooks so I can refer back to it and try and remind myself in a quicker manner. But I find that as I read and annotate, circle things, underline things, I'm registering that in my brain. I'm registering that in my mind. I'm able to, as I said, consume it in all the right ways, consume all the content in all the right ways. But it allows my brain to remember that specific idea a lot more. I love to also just take the opportunity as I annotate and write in these books to contemplate. I will be sitting there, and instead of just taking the content as a receiving exercise and perhaps just kind of getting the gist of it, I find the very act of writing, of underlining, highlighting, allows me to contemplate and reflect on these specific ideas in real time. And I think that's really useful because when I inevitably pick the book back up again, I can remember what I was trying to contemplate. Sometimes you read a book and it stays with you and you can think about it for days after. And what I like to do is try to think about the content in the moment, really soak it in. And I find that annotation really helps me with that. Let's jump over to the desk and I'll show you what annotations I use. And I'll talk through a little bit about my process here as well. This is a book. It's actually a very popular book these days. It's Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. And it's a great, might seem like it's only geared towards nonfiction, but I like to also use it in my fiction books, particularly when there are good things to remember. And I think that's basically one of the other reasons that I annotate my books, is when there are good things to remember. When it comes to annotation, there's tons of different ways you can do it. There's lots of different styles. I should preface this right away saying that I had somewhat of a similar style to this channel, Park Notes. I'm going to put that link here. And what this gentleman did was just describe such a great way of how he annotates his book. He's a philosopher. He likes to annotate his books. He likes to read a lot. And I realized that we have very similar styles, but I loved how he was using his symbology for annotation. So I wanted to take some of that. So if you like any of these symbols that I use, credit where credit is due, Park Notes. So as I'm reading, one of my favorite things to do is have a pen. And I love this pen in particular. This is the Uniball Jetstream 0.5. It's a click pen, ballpoint, beautiful, fine. This is part of my favorite stationery items to use at the same time, so this would be what I use. And I'll just quickly skim through and read. And I tend to read a little bit fast, but it wasn't always the case. It took me quite a bit of time to figure out how to read fast. So I'll go through this and I'll use my pen as a bit of a pointer. And whenever there is something that strikes me as something to remember or refer to, I'll just start underlining it. So in this case in particular, that Marcus composed his own meditations in Greek. Now that seems like it's out of context, but when I flip back into the book here, I see this underlined, I know generally quickly what this entire paragraph was referring to. In this case, how Marcus Aurelius was schooled in Greek, and that is the language he used to compose his books on meditations. So as I'm reading through things, I'll write things down in the margins. I'll write questions to myself as a prompt. What is this? What am I referring to? What is this statement referring to? It's a nice little prompt for me to remind myself to either look into it right away or come back to it later. And sometimes these pages can go blank where there's really nothing there. And other times I start marking up things that are really sticking out for me. Now, some of the symbols, as I'm going to go through my index of symbols that I use here, will start looking like this, where it's an alpha and an exclamation mark, not necessarily together at the same time. Alpha is interesting, exclamation mark is to remember. This is important, you must remember this. Starting to compare other different thought processes from similar topics but unrelated, perhaps. Questions, a little bit of dialogue to myself as I read statements in this paragraph. That doesn't seem right, kind of thing. And so I'll go through it in this fashion where I'm just marking it up. And then when you get into this is all the introduction. It's a gigantic introduction in this book. Now I start using one of my other favorite stationery items is a double-ended highlighter. A double-ended highlighter is typical highlighter on one side, fat. Well, not so typical. I think typical highlighters, if you think of highlighters, certainly this is what I'm reminded of from my school days, gigantic fat highlighters like this. But I also like, in particular about this highlighter, is it's got a narrower or fine tip point on the other side, so you can choose the style of highlighting. I'll underline things, and then if I find it really important, something that I really want it to stick out, I will highlight it. And that usually jumps out at me when I'm going through a book. Equal def, so that's something I borrowed from Park Notes because I liked how he use that for figuring out definitions for himself. The other thing that I will use is a Commonplace notebook. And I've got different versions of Commonplace notebooks on the go. This one here is a general Commonplace notebook. So it'll have passages from books with page number references, the author, the book, the chapter, on where I got that passage from. So I'll keep this pretty close by as I'm reading. Not all the time. If I've got the luxury of doing that at a desk or in a reading chair, I'll have this very close by, one or two of these notebooks. And other times, if I don't have that luxury, well, I'll just mark it up in the book and I'll write things like CP to remind myself to come back to it. Here's one where I've just written CP. And that means that I want to put this in my Commonplace book. Here you'll see an alpha that says that this is really interesting. Sometimes as I don't just underline, I will square off entire sections that this is really important. But you'll see CP here from time to time. As I'm flipping through this, I've noticed that I haven't done what I typically do. When I put a CP, it means that I will come back to it later and put it into my Commonplace notebook. And if I've done that, then what I typically do is just come back to the CP and just put a little check mark beside it. A little bit of check mark beside it. I've done this already, so I know. And that tells me that this has been copied over to a Commonplace notebook in my possession. So underlining, highlighting, Commonplace, this must be a great reference to have in my own compendium. These 3 dots, again, borrowed from Park Notes. I was trying to draw a light bulb before, but I really like Park Notes' symbology of just the 3 dots. When I use this, this is to tell me that this is the main idea of this chapter or this page or that paragraph. This is the thesis, perhaps. I'll square off things because I really want them to stand out for myself. Sometimes I'll highlight, sometimes I'll square off, whatever seems to work. And then down here I'll have the I symbol, which means I need to go research this a bit more, explore this a bit more. The other thing I will do is sometimes when I'm at the end of a chapter, I'll actually just write myself a little bit of a statement or two in terms of what that chapter represented for myself. So those are some of the nonfiction books. So you'll notice the theme here of Stoicism clearly. This is something that I'm exploring this year. This one is interesting because it's a daily, but I'll highlight things that really stuck out to me on that daily read. Definitions, comparisons to other philosophies or thought processes, making sure that I look up other reference material as I'm going through this. As I mentioned, I do this in my nonfiction books too. Sometimes I'll use these little page tabs. It's easier to find some of my favorite things in a book. This is Dune. This is one of my favorite nonfiction books of all time. Love this book. And it's a behemoth. I think it's like an 800-page book, if I remember correctly. Yeah, we're into the appendices right now. Yeah, here we go. Yeah, 794 page. It's big. There's a lot of material. And so I'm sure you'll guess it if you're a Dune head. One of the favorite things here, if you're a Dune head, then you'll know this is the litany the Bene Gesserit use. I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death that brings total obliteration. I will face my fear. I will permit it to pass over me and through me, and when it has gone past, I will turn the inner eye to see its path. Where the fear has gone, there will be nothing. Only I will remain. Wow. When I read that line in high school, those few lines, it really stuck with me. And then when I reread this book in the last few years as the movies were coming out, I took the opportunity to go through the book and do my typical annotation thing and start page tabbing things. I've only got one page tab in here. I'm not sure why, but there you go. So this is how I annotate my books. So let's talk about the legend that I use, the alpha. This is interesting. I'm going to print instead of writing my usual cursive. Remember, the exclamation mark. Explore, research an idea more. Three dots. This is the main idea of the section that I'm reading in. And commonplace to move to my Commonplace notebook. Those are really the only symbols. I'll underline things as I read. I'll square off things, and as I said, I highlight important passages and sections as well. Oh yeah, there is one more that I forgot. Equal def. So if there's a word that I'm not sure what it means or how it's being used, I will write equal def, and then I will write in the margin the definition once I've had a chance to look it up. This is my legend when it comes to my annotations. As I mentioned, favorite stationery items include the Commonplace notebook, a ballpoint pen, preferably in 0.5, because I find this is really good on the cheap paper that's used within books, and I can take ballpoint pens really well. Fine tip Japanese pens. I personally like it. It's a Jetstream. Whatever works for you. Double-ended highlighter. I like to use both sides. And that's really it for stationery items that accompany my reading of books. So tell me, do you annotate your books? Do you like to scribble in your books? Do you like to highlight it? Do you like to page marker the heck out of it? I'd love to know about how you consume your books. Let me know in the comment section below. Also, what kind of stationery tools do you use if you are annotating your books? And for those who are looking to keep their books pristine, I apologize. This video, as I said, wasn't the one for you. But if you're anything like me, I hope you are enjoying the idea of annotating your books. It's a fun thing to get involved into. You make it your own. And if you have been annotating your books for some period of time, then I hope you continue to do so. And I am glad to be in such good company. If you like this content, consider clicking on the Buy Me a Coffee link down below in the description. Listen, I have been very much thoroughly enjoying all the comments. I've been really enjoying the community that's being built up around stationery, analog, slow living. Thank you so much for joining me on my journey. Take care, have a wonderful day, and bye for now.